Huge news here, as I'm sure you can tell from this pile of stuff that's happening right here. We are moving. That is the huge news. And we're not just moving across town, we are moving across the country. Now, I'm gonna get into what this means for the channel in just a little bit here, but I gotta give you some background on how we ended up at this place and where we're going from here. Up till 2019, we were living in Oregon. I've lived most of my life in Oregon, and I really, really love Oregon, but I kind of hadn't really done anything or gone anywhere, and I felt like I could see the next 30 years of my life and they all looked identical.
Male midlife crisis, yikes.
So I wanted to try something a little bit different. I want to at least say I've gone and done something else. So we ended up selling our house there in Oregon, and we took my truck and our trailer and we traveled through the states looking for a new place to live. Now, as I'm sure you guys know, we landed here in Austin, Texas. It seemed like a really nice place. I basically had the opportunity to build this shop. I am not a carpenter, so I think it turned out okay, not spectacular. But it's a great shop, you know, and it was kind of a dream of mine to have a full-size shop like this where I could do the kind of work that I love and also in turn not be working for a dealer anymore. So that was the goal, and I accomplished it. You know, I've been out here working in this shop for the last year, and it's been absolutely amazing. It's been a great start. However, about 6 months after we moved down here is when COVID happened. And so we have not been able to travel home at all, really, since that happened. So I haven't seen my family in over 2 years. And also, Texas, although it's been good to us, it's just so different. It's been a really hard adjustment for me personally to make. I miss Oregon. I miss mountains. I miss rivers, lakes, and all that kind of stuff. It's been a little challenging for me. And so we decided to make the move. We are actually headed back to Oregon, back to my home state. And I know a lot of you are worried that, you know, you're leaving this really nice shop behind. You have this really amazing lift. What's happening here? What are you doing? Well, the deal is I'm doubling down on the channel, guys. I love how this is going so far. I really want to push it forward. I really want to keep doing this. And I also want to open it up a little bit more to doing some more performance-based stuff for some actual customers. So when we get back to Oregon, I'm going to be renting or buying a commercial space up there with a little bit more capacity, a couple of lifts in there at least. That way I can be doing more work, more content for you guys, and doing better videos. So I just want you to be aware that even though this move is happening, by the time you guys see this video, we should already be back in Oregon and looking for a new location. I'm hoping to do some videos for you guys about scouting out a new location, showing you some of the new building options that we're gonna have. And I'm just really, really looking forward to that because I think this is going to be the next step towards building this even better than it already is. Hey guys, Sky from the future here, and welcome to beautiful Central Oregon. Now, if you've been paying attention on the videos the last few times, you'll have noticed that the background did change a little bit. That's because we have been here for about a month, and I have to say, I am so happy to be back. The rugged landscape of the high desert here is just absolutely beautiful. Down here at the end, you've got Mount Bachelor, then you've got the Three Sisters Mountains. Behind me, you have Mount Jefferson, and over here you have Mount Hood. So it is just beautiful. And now that it's fall, the snow is starting to fall in the mountains again, and they are just incredible. So again, I am so happy to be back. Now, in news that will surprise absolutely none of you who are paying attention to the real estate market, we have not yet managed to procure a new shop here yet. It's a little bit frustrating because it's definitely more expensive here in Oregon than it was in Texas. However, there's just not very many shops available right now. There's barely any listings out there, and the ones that are either don't want automotive or they're just exorbitantly priced. So it's creating a bit of a roadblock here, but that does not mean that we are going to stop looking, stop pushing forward. I will have a shop. It's just not going to be as soon as I had originally anticipated. So in the meantime, we are still going to be doing some more videos. I'll be doing like Ask a Tech videos and trying to put together some content as I can. But for this particular video, I thought it'd be a good idea if we go over some of our previous projects that we've done on the channel with the old shop. And what I'm going to do is I put together a little montage of clips here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each one as I go through it. And I'll also include a link in the top corner so you can actually watch that entire build series if you want to, because all of these are in a playlist on my channel. Check it out. All right, first up, we have a 2019 Ford F-150 that I worked on for a good friend of mine named Sam, and I put a 6-inch lift kit on this thing. Now, this is the first lift kit I've done on an F-150, but it's very much similar to all the other lift kits I've installed over the years. It was a really fun project. I actually enjoyed it, and that truck was beautiful. That blue color was absolutely tremendous. As you can see, went ahead and put some 35-inch tires on there, black wheels, and I think the end product really speaks for itself. I mean, look at this truck. What a beautiful truck. All right, next up, this was my 2006 Chrysler 300C. This is a classic. It had a dropped valve seat on there. So went ahead and yanked the engine out and replaced the head, had to replace one of the pistons in there, you know, hone the cylinders, the usual stuff. But this was one of my first series of videos where I really explained on a refresh of the Hemi engine, what's the best way to do that. Had a couple of bloopers involved like this one. Went ahead and installed a catback exhaust on there, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you actually do the MDS delete. As you can see, I installed some Mopar drop springs on there. This dropped the vehicle about 1 inch front and back. Gave it the perfect stance in my opinion. I really like those springs a lot. And then of course, had to get rid of the grandpa mode, get rid of these 18-inch wheels, get those out of here. And I gotta say, I'm just a sucker for these Hellcat replica wheels. They just look amazing. So you combine that with an already black car, oh man. This is probably one of my favorite vehicles. Probably might be my favorite vehicle to come out of the shop. Even though it wasn't super modified and all crazy, it was more of a cruiser than anything else. But I just think the overall look of it was absolutely fantastic. I want another 2006 300C right now. I'm looking for one as we speak. Next up, we have our 2011 Ford F250. This is a Power Stroke diesel, and this thing had eaten the main bearings, which I found out later on is actually a really common problem with these 2011 models. So ended up having to pull the cab on that one, yank the engine out of there. The engine block itself was not salvageable. I ended up having to buy a used block. Yeah, you can see here that did not turn out very well for this engine. Spun those main bearings on there, and it damaged the block badly enough where I had to get a used block. So I essentially had to rebuild this entire engine on this truck, which was interesting. It was a good learning process for me to put this thing all back together again. I have to say, it wasn't the most difficult truck to work on, but there are a lot of components, as you'll see here in just a moment. Yeah, there's a lot going on there with that truck. But I actually enjoyed the process. It was something different for me to do. So got this thing all back together again, fired it up, pulled it out, and this thing had a ton of power. It really puts my 6-liter daily driver to shame. So the truck itself had a lot of miles on it, had 236,000 miles, so it was a little bit beat up overall, but man, this thing has some juice behind it. So I almost kept that truck just because of the extra power it had. All right, next up we have a 2006 Ram 2500 with an engine problem, and this one as well had some serious engine issues, so I ended up having to rebuild the whole entire Cummins engine on there. Wasn't really a huge deal. It was definitely a much simpler process than on the 6.7 Ford truck. As you can see, it actually spun a rod bearing right there. So I ended up having to replace the crankshaft with another used crank and a bunch of new parts on there, put that thing all back together again. Again, a decent enough truck, but with a fair amount of miles on it. Actually, this one only had 160,000 miles, but it seemed like it was a hard 160,000 miles. So got it all back together again. I still like the truck. It had a 3-inch lift on it front and rear, and wasn't that bad. It was a little loose. I had to replace some front end components like you do on most Dodge trucks, but overall, I liked the project. It was fun to do. Had to put some new tires on there because the original tires that were on there, the belt was slipping, so it had a nice bulge in it. So slapped some new tires on there and took it for a drive. It was pretty nice. All right, this is a favorite of mine. This is my 2010 Dodge Challenger RT. Has a 5.7, you can see it already has some lowering springs on it, so it has a nice look to it, but it has these factory wheels, kind of more of an older muscle car type of look. And this was my chance to really show people how straightforward it is to actually modify these cars. So the very first thing I did was I installed a Barton shifter on there. Still one of my favorite modifications. I recommend to any Hemi owner who has a 6-speed transmission to swap out that stock shifter for a Barton unit. Really liked it, especially once it loosened up a little bit after a few weeks of driving it. So much more positive shifts. I think it made a world of difference. I really hate the rubbery feel of the stock shifter. Plus, I just think it looks awesome on there. Then I really focused in on some modifications. Now, they're still fairly mild overall, but I wanted to show how straightforward it is to replace the camshaft with another unit. And then I also installed the SRT headers on there, put a K&N intake manifold, catch can, just some simpler stuff like that. But I just wanted to show how straightforward all of those processes are. So I think this series came out great. And if you guys are interested, again, the link is at the top corner there. Oh yeah, I forgot I put some Mopar performance valve springs on it as well. To be perfectly honest, I'm not really a huge K&N guy myself, but when you're looking to resell a car later on, a lot of people like the K&N products. Couldn't resist going for the Hellcat replica wheels. I think on a Challenger, they just look absolutely correct, especially with the red and black combo. Terrific. Now this car was extremely fun to drive. These modifications gave it just enough extra pep on there that I honestly considered keeping this one because it is so much fun to drive. It was really a good time. I honestly didn't expect it to like it as much as I did. I think overall, just a beautiful looking car. It was a great example when I got it. This is one of the only vehicles that I got where it was not already broken. And so I was able to just kind of focus in on doing the modifications to it. And just overall, I think the finished product was terrific. Exactly what I was looking for of a mild custom. So next up, my brother-in-law, he brought down his Duramax truck. I'm trying to remember what year it was, if it's 05 or 06. I honestly can't remember. Anyway, had to replace the head gaskets on this thing because they were blown, and we knew going into it that they were blown, so went ahead and pulled the cab on this thing, went ahead and started disassembling everything. These are a fairly complicated engine as well, the Duramaxes are. However, it's still just an engine. They're all very similar in the way in which they were put together, so I didn't see it being too big of a deal. Now you can see here, there's the head gasket being blown, and this was on both sides that it looked like that. So just leaking a little bit of combustion pressure into the cooling system. You can see we installed a set of head studs on there, some ARP head studs. And he's been driving the vehicle for several months now, and it's doing absolutely fantastic, towing stuff all over the place. So I'm really happy with the way that job went overall. It was actually kind of a fun engine to take apart and put back together again. A lot of different components on there. There's a lot of stuff to them, but it's still somewhat intuitive on how it goes together. I think maybe the only tricky part is you do have to set the valves here. So doing that whole procedure and making sure to set the valves is a little bit finicky. I don't love setting valves. I don't think in today's modern era, this is still something we should be having to do. But regardless, you know, truck comes back together again and fired it up, and he actually drove that truck out here from Oregon to Texas and then drove it from Texas back to Oregon. So it actually worked out really well. All right, next up, this is the exciting one. This is my 1986 C10 truck. So it's a single cab short bed, and it originally had this crate 350 in there. And I decided to go a little bit crazy, and just because I am a Dodge tech, I put a 392 Hemi engine in there. So you can see I made up the set of custom motor mounts here to go ahead and slap that 392 in there. And originally I was kind of more taking my time, but then I signed up to do Rocky Mountain Race Week 1.0. This is in 2021 here. And so I kind of had to speed things up a little bit. So there's some things I didn't quite get done exactly the way I wanted to, but you can see I got the motor mounts in there. Now the engine is hung, and I'm basically just mocking up the front end here to kind of see what it's going to look like overall. You can see this truck is a long ways away from actually being ready to drive. Now this is the transmission I decided to use for the truck. It's a manual transmission out of an 08 Chevy Colorado. And you'll see if you watch the videos just how weird it was, the combination of things I did to make that work in there. It's a 5-speed trans, but it worked perfect. I love that trans. You can see here, I'm just doing the spring kit on the front to drop it down. The truck already had 2-inch drop spindles on there, but I needed these springs to bring it down even further. Well, as it turns out, these cheap aftermarket springs that were advertised to be a 3-inch drop were more like a 1/2 inch drop. So I ended up taking an extra coil off of them to get it where I wanted it to. Now for the rear, I just ordered this flip kit from eBay, and I'll be honest, it was actually a way better quality on this flip kit than I thought it would be. And it's a really straightforward install to put it in there. So you can see I actually ended up welding it in. It's designed to be bolted in, but I actually welded it to the frame. So here, okay, that's after I cut the front coils on there. So now it's at the actual ride height that I wanted it to be. And you can see with the flip kit just how much it drops it down. It's about a 6-inch drop in the rear. Next, I went ahead and put a limited slip differential in the rear end, and I changed the rear gears to 373 gears. This is a limited slip unit I put in there. I got it off of eBay, and I've been really impressed with it and how well the limited slip actually works. This is part of a video showing the setup of after I put the new gears in there to set the backlash and checking the pattern to get the pattern correct. Next thing here is I'm custom making a set of headers. This is all stainless components. This is something I had never done before, but always wanted to do. So I got the flanges all set up there with the primaries. I had to actually form the tube a little bit to the primary holes because those are D-port ovals. Now you can see I'm starting to get the header together itself, trying to make the runners all fit to where it actually will slide in and out without removing anything else. Here I'm putting the V-band on, going to weld that in place. And there it is. That's the finished header for the passenger side, and that's the one for the driver's side. So I was actually really happy with how these headers came out. I think they look really, really nice. And for a first attempt, I was pretty stoked on them. Although I'm kind of leaning towards twin turboing this truck in the near future, so I might end up remaking those anyway. So here we are. This was another project where I decided for the rear end, I'd want to work on making my own set of CalTrack bars. The CalTrack bars themselves, the design seems very, very simple, very straightforward. So I was like, why can't I just build these myself anyway? So that's what I did. I went ahead and built up a set of bars. Now, after having done so, I can say this, that I spent around $200-ish in materials to build them, and it took me about a full day's worth of labor. Now, CalTrack bars themselves only cost a little over 400 bucks. So was it really worth it to build my own? Not really, I'd have to say. I think it makes more sense to just pay the 400 bucks and be done with it, and then you have a set and you move on from there. So that's kind of what I would say about that. But I am really happy with how the way they came out, and they actually ended up working really well. All right, so next up, I got this engine. This is a 6.4 liter, but it's out of the truck. It was a truck 2500. So a couple of things I had to do to get this thing up to standard here. Well, I put a Texas Speed and Performance Stage 3 camshaft in there. And I also put some SRT valve springs in there because I did not know this initially, but on the Ram 2500, they come with a standard 5.7 valve springs. So I upgraded those to the Scat Pack valve springs, put that Stage 3 cam in there, and this whole thing is running off a Holley Terminator X kit, which is absolutely awesome. I don't have any reservations about going with the Holley X kit. It worked perfectly. So you can see it here with the headers I built. It's all set and ready to go. Now, after I've got the clutch and everything on there, I'm getting the engine back in. I kind of rebuilt the front end at this point, painted up the firewall. I also switched this truck to a manual clutch because there was no provision for that because it was an automatic truck. All right, here I am building the exhaust. I did a dual 3-inch stainless exhaust all the way back. I put catalytic converters in there, but those are converters from a Hellcat motor. So I figure anything with a 700 horsepower engine is plenty enough for me. So I put them in my little X pipe that I built there. You can see me put these Dynamax mufflers in there. Actually, I think they're Dynamax. I honestly don't even remember. Anyway, go ahead and just come back up over the axle and then a simple turn down right underneath the rear bumper. I wanted it very subtle and very tucked up inside there. So very happy with how the whole system came out. I like it a lot. It works well and it sounds fantastic. You can see here, just very, very subtle. It's not really in your face at all, but I really like the stainless look. So then I really wanted the truck to be all one color. So I went ahead and scuffed up the whole bed area here and I went ahead and sprayed it, which I am not a painter by any way, shape or form. So I did my best. It's okay. It's just a primer essentially, and it'll probably need to actually be painted at some other time, but I'm not going to do that. So put some new lights on there, starting to put the truck back together again. At least it's all one color now. And showing you that these were just rollers this entire time. I had some new wheels that I was actually going to put on there. These are VN 510 wheels. They're 18 by 10 all the way around. Those are 275 series tires front and rear. And I think the overall look really fit what I was going for. More of a pro touring style than anything else. And this is the interior. I love the interior on this truck. Really happy with how it came out. Those are Summit Racing seats. And the center console is actually from a 2017 Chevy Silverado. Now, this is me installing the Holley Terminator setup on there. I was doing all the different wiring for it. Again, Holley Terminator setup, absolutely awesome. Look at this thing. It comes with a little 3.5-inch screen, and this shows you all of your gauges, everything you need to know while the engine is actually running. And it was very, very easy to set up and very, very easy to use. So this is basically, I got it all back together again, actually got it running, and I had about 20 minutes to drive this thing before it was time to go to Rocky Mountain Race Week. It seemed fine, so I said, put it on the trailer, let's go. Now, Rocky Mountain Race Week was absolutely awesome. It's everything that you think it is. I had such a ball there, and it was so much fun watching these other guys that you've seen throughout the years be on Rocky Mountain Race Week. I just had so much fun. This was my very first run that I did, and I had literally no idea if it was gonna blow up on the very first run or not. And it was so much fun. Rolling through the gears and really just giving it the business. It wasn't the fastest thing in the world. I ran a 1397 on this very first pass, trying to figure the truck out. It was spinning, of course, because I'm on street tires. But man, it was really just an amazing time.
I mean, that's just amazing. And they got a little a tent set up down there. They're on the next to the portable hoist, I believe, and kind of just down a little ways. But go check it out. They got some good bakery stuff out there, and you know, we kind of let everyone sort of do their thing around here, and you know, we like having everyone around, so.
So this is my final run for the week, and what I'm most proud of for this entire thing is mostly that I actually made it through the entire week. I made it through the entire 1,200-mile drive with no issue. The truck actually performed really well, and this was my final pass of the entire week. And I blurred it out right at the end just because I wanted a little bit more suspense there. But the truth is, I ran a 1297 on that pass. So I have a legit 12-second truck. And of course, the truck has so much more in it. I really need to focus on getting some sort of traction aid for the back. And I also want to get some drag radials or something like that to really see what it'll do in its current configuration before I change it up. I believe the truck has a mid-12 in it. If I can get my 60-foot done, you can see there a 2.1 60-foot. That's not going to get it done. So I think it's got a mid-12 if I can get some power to the ground. And yeah, Rocky Mountain Race Week was just incredible. What an amazing event. I really hope I get the opportunity to do it next year as well. And I want to thank everyone who watched that whole series. Next up, we started on our cheap Hemi challenge series. Now I bought this 06 Chrysler 300 for $1,000, and I was like, it's pretty rough, but I think I can get this thing back together again. It had, of course, dropped another valve seat. So this was the concept behind this, was to really try to get this thing back together as cheaply as possible. However, during the engine disassembly, I found that the engine cylinder bore was scarred badly enough that a simple hone job would not be enough to fix this thing. It would have to be bored, have to have oversized pistons on there. You can see here, it's going to need a new cylinder head on that side. But it just was, the engine itself was a little too far gone to put the money into it because the rest of the car was absolute garbage. I don't know who had their hands on this thing, but there was some seriously sketchy stuff that was done to it. The catalytic converters were gone. There was dents all over the place. You can see here, this is actually a door striker plate that was screwed into the front bumper. What on earth is wrong with people? Anyway, so I shipped that one out the door and I got this truck instead. 03 Ram 1500, got this for $1,400, and it had a hole in the side of the block. So I wasn't really a whole lot farther ahead with this one than the 300. However, this truck overall was in much, much cleaner shape than the 300 was. It was from the original owner, and so you could tell it hadn't really been abused or anything, but it did happen to throw a rod, which created a serious mess of this engine, as you can see right here. Ooh, that's a bad one. Definitely came apart. So went ahead, oh, this is great. Found out, well, boop. Anyway, so needed a new engine, so I went to the junkyard, ended up pulling another Hemi engine from a 03 Ram 1500, and I was going to use that as my donor. Apart, realized I had to replace one piston on there, and then went ahead and did a quick hone job on there, just to show you guys the real process. That was the goal of this entire series, was to see just how cheaply we could put this thing back together in a decent way. One of our projects on there was to replace a lot of the front suspension components, because the upper ball joint, the lower ball joint was bad, the outer tie rod end was bad, so I replaced those with a cheap kit from Amazon. Who knows about the longevity of these parts that I put on there, but at the moment they seem like they're working really well. The truck drove very nicely because it has a nice new front suspension components on there. All right, now we got some of our other components to put the engine back together again. It's basically a refresh is what I'm calling this thing. Not so much a rebuild as a refresh. So put some new piston rings on there. I just reused the original pistons and rods except for that one that needed to be replaced. Got those put into the engine. And in one of my potential regrets here, I used basically a gasket kit through Amazon that included all of the gaskets and head bolts for like $109. I just don't know that I really trust them all that much. I'm a big believer in factory parts, and I think it makes more sense to pay a little bit extra to go with factory parts for like gaskets and things like that. So anyway, I would still recommend using factory head gaskets. But again, this whole build was to see how cheaply this could be done. So that was the direction I went. Got the engine all back together again, got some fluids in there. This thing was running absolutely fantastic. Really happy with the way this truck came out overall. I think even though it does have a little bit of body issues and some paint issues, I think for the price you can see there on the screen, what a terrific truck this is gonna make for somebody else. There it is, guys. That's a list of most of the projects we accomplished in our old shop there, but it's nothing in comparison to what we're going to accomplish in the future. I really hope you guys stay with me, stay with the channel, keep that support that you have, and we will see you next time on Reignited.